Check, check, 1, 2. All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the monthly meeting of the City of Des Moines Zoning Board of Adjustment. This board has the power under Iowa law and the zoning ordinance of the City of Des Moines to hear and make decisions on requests for variances and exceptions from the regulations in the zoning ordinance, to review conditional use requests, and to consider appeals from any decision of city staff in the administration of the zoning ordinance. The members of this board are citizens of the City of Des Moines. They have been appointed to this board by the City Council. The board members are volunteers and they receive no compensation for their public service. I'm going to take a moment here and introduce our board members. On the audience's left is Heather Rowe. Next to her is Kuku Sa. Next to him is Marlis Jones. On the audience's far right is Tom DeCio, then Dave Gare, and Rhonda Cedillo. I'm Mel Pins, the board chair. I'll introduce our city staff who will be assisting us with today's process. To my left is the Board of Adjustment's legal counsel, Attorney Gary Guidelock. Down here to the audience's left on the side row is Bert Dross, the Deputy Planning Administrator, Catherine Drehas, City Planner, and Chris Heilskove, Zoning Enforcement Officer. I'm going to cover the meeting's procedure here briefly. You don't have to be an expert on the procedures, just your own topic of interest. We'll guide you through this, but I'll give you a little background here on how the process works. First and foremost, the Zoning Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial board. This hearing will be conducted within the procedures and format as authorized by Iowa law and this city's ordinances. This meeting is open to the public. The meeting is being recorded by both audio and video for a legal record of these proceedings. The board members have each received a copy of the agenda and the staff recommendations. The board is required to base its decision on each item upon the criteria established by law for the type of relief sought by the applicant. The law applicable to each case has been identified in the written staff report. If the facts, as determined by this board, demonstrates that the criteria established by law for granting the relief have been satisfied, then the board must grant the relief. Otherwise, the board must deny the requested relief. Each item will be announced in the order that it appears on the agenda. The items that are listed on the consent portion of the agenda, which is our first section of the agenda, are not planned to be individually discussed. Rather, they will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report, unless the appellant does not agree to the conditions that have been recommended by staff, or if there's an individual in this audience or a member of the board that requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda so that a full discussion on the matter can occur before a decision is made. And I'll come back to the consent agenda here in just a moment. For the regular portion of the agenda, after an item is announced, city staff will first give a brief overview of the appeal, and they will present any written comments that have been received prior to the hearing. For that item, then the applicant or their representative will be allowed up to 10 minutes to present their appeal. We'll then move to the public comment portion of the hearing for that agenda item, and anybody that wishes to speak in support of, in opposition to, or even in neutrality of an appeal will be allowed up to 5 minutes each to provide their comments. This will be their one and only opportunity to address the board regarding the item at hand. Once all concerned citizens have spoken, the board will then ask any additional questions of city staff. Lastly, the applicant will be given 3 more minutes for a rebuttal or other closing comments if they so choose. All speakers must speak only from the podium here at the center of the room. There's a microphone there, and there's a little overhead screen if you need it. You must give your presentation by first giving both your complete name and address of business or residence as appropriate. In the event, you may need to be contacted for legal notices related to the outcome of this appeal. All speakers are requested to remain courteous and to focus their comments only upon those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law has been satisfied. Speakers are also asked to ensure that they, pardon me for a second here, get rid of that. Speakers are also asked to remain courteous, to focus their comments only on those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law has been satisfied. Please be respectful of time considerations, and if necessary, the board chair will limit further comments by a speaker if they exceed their time limitation. After all comments have been received, the board chair will close any further public comment on the agenda item. The board will immediately deliberate the request and will make a decision here today on the appeal. Please note that it always takes at least 4 affirmative votes for any zoning appeal to gain approval. If your appeal is approved today, we ask that you would wait at least 1 week from today's hearing to contact the city's Permit and Development Center if you would need to obtain any necessary building or sign permits that are related to your appeal. This will allow the decision of the board to be documented in the form of a decision and order. That document will be provided to you and city staff for the record. Any appeal that is approved by the board must be implemented, constructed, or otherwise utilized within 2 years of the date of the board's decision, or such approval shall expire. Finally, the decisions of this board can only be appealed in the Iowa District Court. So if you believe you've been harmed by an error made by this board, your only remedy is to seek relief through the court within 30 days of the filing of the board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this board are wrong, you may petition the City Council to change those regulations for future considerations. All material that is written or otherwise used today as part of any presentation is part of the permanent record. So if there's anything you want to present today, pictures, drawings, documents, you can certainly do that, but you'll need to give copies of those to city staff for the record. If you'd like a copy of anything presented today, ask city staff after the hearing. Just some brief housekeeping items. We ask that you please avoid any undue conversation in the audience so as to limit distractions during the hearing. Please ensure your cell phone has been silenced. And if you need to use the restroom at any time during the hearing, just walk out the doors past the stairwell. You don't have to go back downstairs. There's restrooms just to the left of the staircase. And once the agenda item you're interested in has been completed, you're welcome to leave the hearing, or you can stick around for further education. So that's our background. As I said, we'll take you through this step by step. So the first thing we do is we're going to review our consent agenda. Again, these are items that the request city staff have recommended approval, subject to some certain conditions. And so as a block, we would be looking at voting for approval without taking any comments or testimony on these items. But I'll go ahead and review them briefly to see if there's any concern from the audience or this board. Item 1 is a conditional use request related to construction of some public playground, recreational facilities, the vicinity of 1701 Fleur Drive. Would there be anybody opposed in the audience to us granting the conditional use request for this interest? Just raise your hand if so. Okay, seeing none. Item 2 is a zoning exception related to some signage, an appeal for signage at 2725 Merle Hay Road related to First Assembly Church of God. Is there anybody in the audience that would be opposed to granting some zoning exceptions for some signage? Any hands? Seeing none. And item 3, zoning exception request. The appellant in this case is Polk County, related to Veterans Auditorium for installation of some temporary signage prior to some permanent signage being placed. That's at 733rd Street. Anybody here opposed to the board granting the requested zoning exception for signage? Okay, so seeing none, we've got items 1, 2, and 3. Unless there's any further discussion by the board, would there be a motion to grant approval of these 3 items? Motion by Rhonda, second by Marlis. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. All right, motion carries 7-0. So if you were here for items 1, 2, or 3, give us about a week, and we'll get that in the form of a decision and order for approval. And then if you need some sign permits, then you can go down and apply for those. So thank you for coming in for the hearing. So we'll just take a break here for a moment. If anybody wants to leave, they can. Some hearty congratulations. Okay. All right. So for our regular portion of the hearing where we will discuss our items, I believe we just have one item today. That's item 4. It's a use variance request at 414 61st Street related to reuse of a vacant building in what's known as an F flood zoning district. And Bert Drost is going to give us the background.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Bert Drost, planning staff for the City of Des Moines. The request before you is a use variance to allow reuse of an existing building within the F flood district. The subject property is located on the west side of 61st Street, just to the north of Grand Avenue. It's kind of behind the Viva Mexican restaurant, next to McDonald's. This blue line here shows the F district. I can pull up the actual flood map. So the site is right here. If you see my cursor, the light blue is the flood plain, whereas the cross-hatched area is the actual floodway for the Walnut Creek there. So you can see this property as well as the other restaurants in the area are within the flood plain for Walnut Creek. The building was previously used as the Vibrant Credit Union. It's been vacant for some time. So a new business is wanting to relocate there. It would be like an office type use. They recently went through the rezoning process. They had the rezoning denied since the property is within the FEMA designated floodplain. It didn't make sense to rezone it. So their path is to get this use variance from the Board of Adjustment. Here are a few site photos that show the existing building. You can see it has the drive-up teller window from when it was the credit union. This is looking on the north side of the building. And then this is looking from Walnut Hill Drive to the north across the northern portion of the site. This is a site plan that the applicants provided. North is to the left. The building is here at the south end of the property. It is on the highest portion of the property. And then they would be retaining the existing parking lot. Staff does support this use variance. As you know, the criteria for granting variances are pretty stringent, but this is one case where unless a variance is granted, there really isn't any use permitted in the flood district. We do feel that the use variance is appropriate since we can put some conditions on it that will ensure it does comply with floodplain development. So we have recommended approval, just subject to 4 conditions. 1, that any site improvements shall be in accordance with standards applicable in Chapter 50 of the city's municipal code, and 50 is the chapter that deals with floodplain regulations. 2, that any use of the building shall not impede emergency access to the subject property or surrounding neighborhood. 3, any use of the existing building shall be in accordance with all building codes and fire codes. 4, the board's decision and order shall be recorded to ensure future property owners are aware of these conditions. And then 5, if the zoning officer determines that the property has become a nuisance or has violated the conditions of approval, they can bring it back to the board for reconsideration. And one thing I did want to point out is that in Chapter 134, Section 6.7.9, it does talk about when a use variance would lapse. So say the building would be flooded again and destroyed by more than 50% of its replacement value, the variance would expire. So say it floods and is destroyed, they would be looking to come back to the board for another use variance before they're allowed to reoccupy the building. And then that section of code also mentions if the building's vacant for more than a year, then the variance expires as well. And we did get 2 comment cards back in opposition. They're located to the east of the site. I'm not sure this person understood because they talk about a park use. I'll leave it up there. And then this one, maybe I'll zoom in for you. Oops. But otherwise, that concludes my presentation. So if anybody has questions for me, I'd be happy to take them.
Board members, questions anybody has for Bert?
Hey, Bert, are all the businesses in a floodplain down there? There's a McDonald's, there's Viva, there's some kind of a entertainment.
Well, the White Willow, it's parking lot. If you look at the map here, the blue is the floodplain. It's like the White Willow.
The
event
building's
space
outside of
is
it, but the
outside.
parking lot's in it.
Right, and like the either or restaurant
Yeah.
is actually kind of like on an island
Yep.
above, and then the Pizza Hut takeout is in the floodplain, but then the other buildings are high enough that they're outside.
Okay, thanks.
I believe the yellow is the 500-year floodplain, where the blue is the 100-year floodplain.
Bert, just a couple brief ones, and this is one that always kind of gets me. What's the difference between a floodplain and the floodway?
The floodway is when there's a flood event. That's where
Okay.
the channel is. So that's it's most likely to flood, and also when there is a flood, that's where the water is moving
Okay.
the most rapid. So we definitely wouldn't want to
Okay.
see any buildings in the floodway.
Because a floodway, yeah, so force of water can take things away then, and that's
Right.
the area that is most likely to flood. You know, if you quote, "get out of the banks," that's probably what's going to take
Correct.
it.
Right.
So then, what's the flood plain?
That's where it would flood if there's a 100-year flood event. Which
Okay.
We've seen several
Right.
100-year flood events in the
Okay.
last 100 years.
All right, yeah, so, yeah, there's a percentage where it could be impacted by flood waters,
Right.
but not scary in the floodplain, or in the floodway then.
Correct.
To the best of your knowledge, has this building been impacted by any flooding?
I'm not that I'm
Okay.
aware of.
And I'm surprised to a degree with staff's recommendation here, because usually we don't want things in a floodplain. A lot of times it's been if the building had been damaged more than, 50, 60%, that kind of stuff. So from staff's perspective, are you looking at this, hey, the building's in good shape, there's no problem with it?
Right, yeah, and the city's not prepared to buy it out.
That
either,
was
so-
going to be my next thing. I know
Right.
there's times and places where it makes sense to do buyouts.
Right,
But either by historic, like East 38th, hey, let's just get people out of here
Right.
by 4 Mile. But here, that hasn't seemed to be a drumbeat of wanting to clear out that area.
correct.
Okay, I just ate at that McDonald's yesterday. And is there a proposed use for this building to any degree?
I
that
know
you're
it's an
aware of?
office, it might be real estate office, but I'll let the
Sure.
applicant explain.
All right, excellent. All right, thank you. All right, if there's no other questions, then, all right, so we turn the page here. So applicant or representative of the applicant, you guys have up to 10 minutes. Give your reasoning for your appeal, for your variance request. We just need you to start off with your name and address as appropriate.
Jeffrey A. Gaddis, Civil Engineering Consultants, 2400 86th Street, Suite 12, Urbandale, Iowa. I'm here on behalf of 414 61st Street LLC, Daniel Doyle. I'm his representative on the project. We're also preparing the site plan / all the applications. You did a very nice job of kind of explaining the project for not having had been directly involved with the beginning steps, but obviously we went through the zoning requests. We knew we were going to get denied, but it's as part of the overall city rezoning, and this was with that designated in the floodplain, but the use was allowed. Unfortunately, my client does not operate as a bank, so we can't ride underneath the previous use. So he operates as a small business. This building meets his requirements, and his complete intent is just to essentially do interior remodel for his, basically convert loan officers' offices into secretaries and his personal office, that type of business. And I noticed you brought up the floodplain, and I can go into a lot of detail on it because unfortunately I do know too much about that. But obviously with the floodplain district, they rezoned it that way, and the city has a new ordinance that requires a 3-foot buffer from what would be called the base flood elevation, which is determined from the Iowa DNR based on the flood insurance study and the slopes. We can get into a whole bunch of fun stuff, but you don't want to go there. Anyway, this building exceeds that current BFE. So if
Okay.
flood water were to hit the building, and here's where it gets really weird, It will not flood the first floor, nor damage the building, nor damage anybody within it. So there's a difference when water touches a building and what is flood-proof or
Right.
completely removable from a flood insurance. This building doesn't necessarily meet complete removal from flood insurance, but the probability of ultimate failure is very low because it would have to top the foundation wall, which the finished floor is above all of that, and it would have to cave in the walls, which we've seen this one obviously has been surrounded. If McDonald's was surrounded by the flood, which it was, because I do have intimate knowledge of that building, this building would have had the same water pressure to it.
Okay.
Obviously, it survived a couple of those floods. So those issues, as far as water touching the building, is different than is it flood proof. It is flood protected, meaning it is so protected I was quite shocked when we opened and went inside. I said, I need to see the basement. And he said, well, okay, fine, show you the basement. As you open a door in the floor to stand up in a utility closet to look down, and there is literally just a basement. Not even utilities down there. It's just foundation wall. So from a flood and proof or FEMA flood, it doesn't meet that, but it meets all the other requirements. In other words, nobody's going to get harmed. You can sit in the building until the floodwaters go down. So, this building meets kind of a rare occasion of I'm flood safe, I'm not flood proof, but the probability of any damage, and I believe the client would agree with the city, if this thing were to be leveled from a flood, he's probably not going to want to build back either. So, and if he does, it's going to have to be underneath the site plan ordinance, which then, guess what? We're going to be raising it up another 2 feet to get it above those things. And then it would be a flood-proof basement under the current standards. But in 1970, they didn't have those same standards. Other than that, the sites, we're designing around the city requirements for the site plan. We've got comments back a couple times now. No major issues with the city. We did understand the neighbors sent some comment letters, and I can only respond to people use that grassy field as a park. So they kind of nicknamed it the dog park, even though it is private property. But I'm sure if your city's willing to pay a good check, I'm willing to bet he'll sell that to you for as a dog park. But the physical use to rezone it, it's almost impossible.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your presentation and base flood elevation. If we do have a couple comments, hang on just a second.
Oh, sure.
Anybody
Yeah.
have
I
questions
can
for
repeat
the
the number.
applicant? Okay. And maybe I need to explain this, but I guess we need to have speakers sign some kind of a form. We might need to change my opening remarks.
Oh,
Yeah, if you put your, yeah.
Sure.
We're pretty easy today. This isn't a heavy agenda, so.
There's not a lot of us here today.
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions, I am listening.
Yeah, Jeffrey, just one brief one, just because you said the building's built in 1970. If I remember right, was this where Crouse, Gardner and Associates had their landscape architect office? Are you old enough to remember that?
I know I have gray hair. I do not recall that.
But the building goes back to what, what'd you say, the 70s? when it was
Yeah,
built?
I found some plans that show the
Yeah.
building from the
I think there was a
70s.
landscape architectural firm there back in like, I don't know, 90s era.
That could definitely explain
Yeah,
some very
yeah.
large
And it had been
trees.
what, a bank loan office for some time?
Yeah, it was a bank without a drive up, and then they added the drive up later.
Yeah.
That was after the 2008 flood.
Okay. And do you help, I know you help with site plans, you guys do great work. Do you also help with signage plans for your clients?
Yeah, if it,
Just kind of remind your clients, comply with the signage requirements, ask
Yeah.
for permits for signage first.
I
And
don't imagine he's not, his particular business isn't one where you're
Yeah.
advertising to get people there.
Yeah. Yeah, we did have somebody that was in the building maybe 10 years ago that wanted to have a huge pole sign to say, hey, I'm a block off Grand and I need extra signage, and
Yeah.
we weren't too keen on that, so.
I'm guessing he would rather have, I don't want you to know where my building is type,
But yeah, as long as somebody can, work within the sign ordinance, they can certainly advertise on their building. Cool. All right, well, Jeffrey, I think, unless anybody has anything else? Okay, we'll see if there's anybody that wishes to speak in support of the applicant's request. That's how we start off. Got up to 5 minutes. Seeing none, anybody that wishes to speak in opposition to the applicant's request? Seeing none, we also cover the neutrality base just in case. Anything else staff needs to add or zoning enforcement? Nope. Okay, well then we'll go to close the public portion and go to board deliberation. What do you think, folks?
I can see the reason that the city said that we should approve this, or recommended that we approve this. I don't have any concerns.
Yeah, this is in my neighborhood. And the park that they refer to is the Waterbury Neighborhood Association, I think through approval with the credit union would use that for a neighborhood get-together, the green space back there. So I walk up and down that path all the time. I think it's a great opportunity to put a building that's empty back to use, so I'm for it.
Yeah, and I guess in the variance case, in this case, it's not of the owner's own making. It's strange things related to the land in question. It's not just for a more profitable use. It'd be for any use. So, and in this case, the building hasn't been damaged. It's not overly destroyed. So yeah, if they can take care of it, great. All right, if there's any other comments, so say. If none, would there be a motion one way or the other here?
I'll make a motion for staff.
Okay, in your neighborhood. All right, motion by Dave and second by Marlis to approve staff recommendation for the use variance for business office use, subject to conditions 1 through 5. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries 7-0. Okay, congrats, everybody. You can get back in there and get that place back in action. Thank you. Those are our agenda items, I think, for business. Only thing we've got, I believe, are minutes from the last meeting. So if you were here at last meeting, if there's any changes, say so. If none, would there be a motion to approve the minutes?
I would make that motion.
Motion by Marlis, second by Rhonda. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. Once again, 7-0. We make this so easy. Okay, motion carries, and that concludes this hearing.
Is that a record?
28